Jinwoo sat in a dim room, his face lit by the soft glow of 4 computer screens. The air hummed with the sound of machines. He worked at the Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute. His job was to watch the quiet signals from space. Most days, nothing happened. Today felt the same. He sipped cold coffee and checked the data streams. Lines of numbers and gentle waves moved across his screens. These showed the pull of gravity from stars and planets. It was normal, peaceful work. Outside, the city of Taejun was sleeping. A small blink appeared on his second screen. A tiny spike in the gravitational wave data. Jinwoo leaned forward. He rubbed his eyes. It was probably an error, a passing satellite or a glitch in the system. He typed a command to run a diagnostic check. The system reported no problems. He marked the spike and moved on. 10 minutes later, it happened again. This time, the spike was bigger. It came from the same area of space, near Jupiter. A cold feeling started in Jinwoo's stomach. He opened a new window, pulling data from a deep space telescope pointed at that sector. The image loaded slowly. Stars, the pale band of the Milky Way, the gas giant Jupiter as a small disk. And then he saw them. Shadows against the starlight. At first, they were just shapes, darker than the space around them. They were massive. They came out of nowhere, near Jupiter's orbit. 1, then 3, then 10. Soon, the whole sector was full of them. They moved together, silent and smooth, like black stones sliding across a pond. They did not broadcast any signal. They did not send a message. They just moved, heading straight for Earth. Jinwoo's heart pounded. He fumbled for the direct line to his boss, Manager Kwon. The phone rang too many times. Kwon speaking. The voice was tired, annoyed. Manager, this is Jinwoo in gravitational monitoring. You need to come to the control room. Now. What is it? A meteor? No, sir. It's a fleet. An unidentified fleet. Emerging from near Jupiter. On an intercept course. A pause. Jinwoo heard a sigh. Jinwoo, check your calibrations. It's the new Chinese probes or a reflection from... Sir, I am looking at them. They are not ours. They are not anything from our catalogs. They are very, very big. Please, come now. He hung up and sent urgent alerts to the global networks. NORAD, the European Space Agency, the others. Within minutes, his quiet room was not quiet anymore.
Phones rang.
Alarms chimed softly. His colleagues rushed in, their faces confused. Manager Kwon arrived, his shirt wrinkled. He looked at Jinwoo's main screen and his face went pale. By all the heavens, he whispered. The world began to wake up. News channels split their screens. On one side, a talking head. On the other, the blurry telescope images Jinwoo had provided. Words like first contact and alien invasion flashed in bold letters. But in the control room, the mood was dark. The data was clear. The objects were accelerating at speeds impossible for human technology. Their composition was unknown. Their intent, clear from their path, was not friendly. A call connected on the large wall screen. It was the United Nations Security Council emergency meeting. Voices overlapped in different languages. People argued about diplomacy, about sending welcome messages. Jinwoo watched his instruments. He spoke without thinking, his voice cutting through the chatter on the call. You cannot welcome them. All the faces on the screen turned to look at his feed. What did you say? A French diplomat asked. You cannot welcome them? Jinwoo repeated, his voice flat. They are not listening. Look. He shared a new data graph. They are emitting a low-level energy field. It is a scanning beam but also a disruption field. It is already disabling our satellites in its path. This is not a greeting. This is a prelude. The arguing started again, louder. Some called for a military response. Others begged for calm. Jinwoo tuned it out. He watched the fleet, past the orbit of Mars. It was coming fast. He thought of his family in Busan. His mother, his little sister. He had never done anything important in his life. He was just a man who watched screens. Now, he was the first man to see the end of the world, and he could do nothing but watch. Manager Quan put a hand on his shoulder. You did your job, Jinwoo. You saw them. No one else did. That was no comfort. The fleet grew larger on the screen. They did not answer any hails. They did not change course. They moved with a terrible, silent purpose. The advanced defenses of Earth, the lasers, the missile platforms, the orbital stations were placed in front of them like toys. And as the first human military lasers fired harmless light against the dark hulls of the lead ships, Jinwoo knew. This was not a war. This was something else. He just didn't know what. He kept watching his screens, the numbers and the waves. As the shadows fell over the blue-green planet he called home, the only sound was the hum of the machines and the frantic beating of his own heart. The world held its breath and then screamed. News feeds showed the brilliant, useless flashes of human weapons against the dark ships. Missiles detonated harmlessly against energy shields that shimmered like oil on water. Railgun slugs simply vanished in bursts of blue light. The technological gap was not a gap. It was a canyon, and humanity was at the bottom looking up. The Krell fleet, as people had started to call them, did not fire back. Not at first. They simply ignored the attacks and began their descent. But they did not aim for cities. This confused everyone. They bypassed New York, Tokyo, and Moscow. Their massive landers, shaped like dark teardrops, settled instead in remote, geologically significant places. The Australian outback, the Amazon basin, the Siberian tundra, and a small, cold camp on the rocky coast of Greenland. Mira pulled her thermal jacket tighter. Her satellite phone had been buzzing with frantic alerts for hours before it went dead. The last image she saw was a shaky news report of a lander touching down in Iceland. Now, there was only static. Her team of 3 other surveyors was nervous. They were alone. "What do we do, Mira?" asked her younger assistant, Teho. His eyes were wide. "We observe," she said, her voice calm. It was a calm she did not feel. "We are geologists. That is our job. We watch the Earth." She climbed a ridge overlooking the frozen plain where they had been taking core samples. The sky, usually a vast pale sheet, was wrong. A shadow grew, blocking the weak sun. A low hum vibrated through the soles of her boots, up into her bones. It was a sickening feeling, like the world itself was feeling nauseous. The Krell lander came down without fire or smoke. It was silent. It was black, absorbing the light around it. It settled on the permafrost a kilometer away. It didn't look like a ship from a war movie. It looked like a strange, dark seed. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, a beam of deep violet light shot from its base into the ground. The ground did not explode. Instead, it began to dissolve. The ice, rock, and soil shimmered and broke apart into a fine, glowing dust that was sucked up into the belly of the lander. The process was utterly silent except for that low, unsettling hum. Myra's professional mind kicked in, pushing the fear aside. She grabbed her instruments. She pointed a seismic reader at the site. The numbers jumped erratically. She aimed a spectrometer. The data was bizarre. The beam was emitting a specific resonant frequency, tuned to the exact mineral composition of the Greenlandic bedrock. It wasn't just digging. It was vibrating the bedrock apart at a molecular level and consuming the raw material. "They're not here for us," she whispered, a horrifying understanding dawning. "They're not here for our water or our air." She looked at the readings again. "They're here for the planet, the crust itself. They're eating the bones of the Earth." Meanwhile, the global military response was turning into a panic. Fighter jets that approached the landers would suddenly lose power and fall from the sky, their electronics fried by invisible pulses. Tanks sent to investigate in Siberia found their metal armor becoming brittle and flaking away near the violet beams. The Krell did not fight armies. They ignored them, like a farmer ignores ants while plowing a field and what was left of the command centers. The truth was becoming clear. This was not an invasion for conquest or slavery. This was planetary strip mining on a godlike scale. The Krell were consumers of worlds. They would reduce Earth to a hollow, lifeless core and move on. Back in Taejun, Jinwoo was now in a crowded operations room. The initial fear had hardened into a grim, hopeless tension. He watched thermal scans of a lander in the Deccan Plateau in India. The ground temperature was plummeting around the beam, while the lander's energy signature soared. It was converting mass to energy with terrifying efficiency. A senior Air Force officer slammed his hand on a desk. "We hit the one in the Sahara with a tactical nuke. A direct hit." Everyone turned. "And?" Manager Kwan asked. "Nothing." The blast was absorbed. The beam flickered for 3 seconds and then continued. The lander was untouched. "It's like they eat radiation, too." A silence heavier than lead filled the room. Jinwoo felt the last flicker of hope die. If a nuclear weapon was just more food, what was left? He thought of Mira then. His friend from university, the pragmatic geologist who always said the Earth was tougher than people thought. She was in Greenland, right in the path of one of these things. Was she already gone, turned to dust along with the rocks she loved to study? He looked at the global map. Dozens of violet dots glowed, each one a lander, each one a wound in the planet. They pulsed slowly, in unison, like a horrible, steady heartbeat. The Krell were not attacking life. They were dismantling the very stage on which life stood. And humanity, for all its noise and fury, was just a minor nuisance, soon to be swept aside with everything else. The war was over before it began. This was something else. This was the end of the world, not with a bang, but with a silent, starving hum. The world was unraveling, but in a small, tidy village house near the coast, General Park saw a pattern. Retired for a decade, his world had shrunk to his garden, his books, and the news channel. Now, the news channel showed the end of everything. He sat perfectly still in his chair, his hands folded on his lap. The screen showed a live feed from a drone, now shaky and failing. It was flying over the peak-to-mountain region. A Krell lander sat in a remote volcanic caldera, its violet beam drilling deep into the ancient rock. The sound from the drone's microphone was terrible. It was not an explosion. It was a deep, rhythmic thrum. A resonant sound that made the teacup on General Park's table vibrate in its saucer. That sound. That specific, terrible frequency. It did not bring fear. It brought a memory, so old and buried it felt like a dream. He was a boy, no more than 7. He was in the workshop behind his grandfather's old house. His grandfather was not a soldier. He was an engineer, a quiet man who worked on big, secret national projects. The old man was bent over a dusty blueprint, his hands stained with grease. He was talking, more to himself than to the boy. "They think in terms of bombs," his grandfather mumbled, tapping the paper.
Big bombs, fast missiles.
"They are children playing with fire. The real defense, the lasting defense, is in the ground itself." Young Park had been playing with a model truck. "In the ground, grandfather?" "The Giamunjo projects," the old man said, his eyes distant. "Not for attacking the sky, for calming the earth, for making it solid, unshakable. If an enemy ever tried to shake the world apart with a bad frequency, these would be the answer. Turn their own noise against them, bury it, silence it." He had laughed then, a dry, coughing sound. "But they shut it down. Too strange. Too much money. They buried the machines and forgot. They always forget." The memory faded. General Park stared at the screen. The Krell beam was the definition of a bad frequency. It was shaking the world apart. And his grandfather, a man he had thought was just sharing old stories, had spoken of a defense against exactly this. It sounded insane. It was the desperate fantasy of a scared old man. But Park had spent his life in the military. He had seen secret projects come and go. He knew that during the Cold War, many strange ideas were born from fear. What if one of them was real? He stood up, his joints protesting. He walked to an old cabinet and pulled out a heavy, leather-bound photo album. It was not for photos. It was where he kept his grandfather's papers, things he could never throw away. He flipped past diagrams of old bridges and dams. He found a folder brittle with age. Inside were not official documents. They were notes, sketches on yellowed paper. His grandfather's neat handwriting filled the margins. He saw words: resonance dampener, crystalline lattice integration, planetary harmonic stabilization. The sketches showed systems buried deep, connected to massive, natural geological formations. Point one phrase was circled heavily. The shield is not a wall. It is a song. The right song makes the earth silent to the wrong noise. General Park's breath caught. This was not a weapon to shoot. It was a system to neutralize a specific kind of attack, an attack that used vibrational energy to destroy. The Krell were not just mining. Their beam was a precise, destructive vibration that he needed to talk to someone who understood the Earth. And he needed data. He thought of his old friend's son, Gene Wu, the quiet technician at the Space Institute. He would have access to the global sensor data. He would be able to see if the Earth was singing back. Finding a working phone line was difficult. The networks were failing. After an hour of trying, a grainy video connection finally opened on his tablet. Jin Wu's face appeared, etched with exhaustion and despair. He was in a chaotic room full of people and screens. "General Park?" Jin Wu said, confusion cutting through his tiredness. "Sir, is everything all right?"
No, Jinguo.
"Nothing is all right," Park said, his voice the steady, calm command he had used long ago. "I need you to listen, and I need you to change what you are looking for. Sir, we are looking at the end of the world. What else is there? Look deeper. Do not look at their ships. Look at our planet. Scan for unusual seismic activity, not the activity the landers cause. Look for a secondary resonance, a response, a pulse that is not theirs. Look for a frequency that fights back." Jin Wu stared. "A response? General, our weapons do nothing. The planet doesn't fight." "Your grandfather," General Park said slowly, "my father's friend, was a brilliant man. He believed in preparing for threats no one else could see. He worked on something buried. I think it might be listening. Please, look." The request was absurd, but the desperation in the old general's eyes was real. Jin Wu, having nothing left to lose, nodded. "What am I looking for?" "A song," General Park said, repeating his grandfather's words. "Look for the Earth's own song." Jin Wu stared at the blank space on his screen where General Park's face had been. The connection was lost. The words hung in the air. Look for the Earth's own song. Around him, the control room was a tomb of low voices and hopeless data. People watched the Krell consume continents. A song was the last thing anyone was looking for. Manager Quan approached, his face gray. "The lander in the Congo has increased its absorption rate by 300%. At this speed." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Jin Wu nodded absently. His mind was not on the consumption. It was on the absurd request. His own grandfather had been a quiet mathematician. He had never spoken of secret projects. But he remembered his father speaking of General Park's grandfather with deep respect. A man who saw the world in vibrations and frequencies, his father had said. With a sigh, more to honor the old general than from any hope, Jin Wu opened a new analysis window. He bypassed the main military feeds. Instead, he tapped into the raw, global network of geological sensors. These were simple machines, spread across the world, meant to track earthquakes and volcanic activity. They listened to the grumbles of the planet that he filtered out the massive, chaotic vibrations coming from the Krell lander sites. It was like trying to silence a scream to hear a whisper. He set the system to look for a repeating pattern, a frequency that was steady and artificial, buried under the destruction. For an hour, nothing. Just the relentless, crushing signal of the world being eaten. He was about to close the program when a small, rhythmic pulse appeared on his secondary monitor. It was faint, almost lost in the noise. It was not coming from a Krell site. Its origin point was different. It was somewhere in the mountains of the Korean peninsula. His breath caught. He leaned closer. The pulse was not a weapon's signature. It was low, deep, and constant. A steady thump-thump-thump, like a heartbeat. And it was not random. When he graphed it against the primary frequency of a Krell beam from Siberia, he saw it. They were linked. The Krell beam was a violent, jagged spike on his screen. The new pulse was a smooth, rounded wave. but they shared the same base frequency. The new pulse was an almost perfect mirror image, inverted. Where the Krell signal peaked, this one dipped. It was an echo, but a correcting echo. A canceling signal. "It can't be," he whispered. He isolated the signal and amplified it. He mapped its source. The coordinates pointed to a remote, heavily forested region in Gangwon-do. Officially, there was nothing there. No military base, no research facility. Just old mountains. With trembling fingers, he accessed old, archived satellite surveys of the area. Geological scans from 50 years ago. He scrolled through layers of data until he found deep subsurface imaging. There, 2 kilometers beneath a mountain ridge, the scan showed a massive geometric anomaly. It was not rock. It was a perfect hexagonal crystalline structure, bigger than a city block. And from its edges, faint lines spread out, connecting to other known geological faults, like roots or nerves. General Park's words were not the ramblings of an old man. They were a blueprint. Jinwoo's heart hammered against his ribs. He reopened a communications line. It took several tries, but General Park's face flickered back onto the screen. "General," Jinwoo said, his voice tight with urgency. "I found it. You were right. There is a pulse. It's in Gangwon-do. Deep. It's answering them. But it's too faint. It's just a whisper. It's like it's listening, but it doesn't know how to shout back." General Park's eyes, which had been clouded with age, sharpened into the eyes of the commander he once was. "It's in receiving mode," he said, thinking aloud. "My grandfather's notes, they mentioned a trigger. Primary command nexus. The system is automatic but passive. It hears the attack and tries to dampen it locally, to stop an earthquake. But this is a global attack. It needs to be switched. It needs to be told to broadcast, to fight back." "How?" Jinwoo asked, feeling a strange, terrifying hope. "How do we switch on a machine that's been buried for 50 years? "We go there," General Park said simply. "We find the entrance. We find the switch." "That's impossible. The mountains are huge. The roads are probably blocked. The Krell? Do you have a better idea?" General Park's voice was calm, but final. "You have the coordinates. I know those mountains from my youth. We find a way in. And we need someone who understands what that beam is doing. We need a geologist." Jinwoo's mind raced. A geologist. He thought immediately of Mira, lost somewhere in Greenland. Was she even alive? He had no way to contact her. Their world was falling apart. Then, a new alert popped up on his screen. It was a fragmented data packet, sent on an old, low-frequency emergency band used for polar research. The origin point, Greenland. The sender ID, Mira _. The message was just raw data files and a single line of text. Beam frequency attached. Is tuned to bedrock resonance. They are not invaders. They are miners. Earth is the ore. She was alive. And she had the key, the exact resonant frequency of the Krell beam. Jinwoo looked from the message to General Park's determined face on the screen. A technician, a retired soldier, and a geologist lost in the ice. It was not an army. It was not a plan. It was the only thread of hope left in the world, and it was terrifyingly thin. The plan was a fragile thing, built on whispers and old paper. In the control room, Jinwoo worked with a frantic energy he didn't know he had. He packaged Myra's data from Greenland. It contained the precise, terrible frequency of the Krell beam. He merged it with the coordinates of the hidden structure in Gangwon-do. He then sent it, along with General Park's scanned notes, to every military and civilian channel he could think of. The responses were silence or worse, disbelief. One weary colonel told him, "Son, we are coordinating a global evacuation that won't happen. We don't have time for fairy tales about magic crystals." But General Park had time. He was already moving. He left his quiet house in an old jeep he kept for fishing trips. The roads were chaotic with people fleeing cities, but he drove away from the crowds, toward the mountains. He knew the back routes, the forgotten paths from long-ago training exercises. His soldier's mind took over, mapping the journey to Jinwoo's coordinates in Greenland. Mira and her team watched the Krell lander. It was a constant, humming horror. But Myra's focus was absolute. She studied the data on her portable screen. The frequency was a complex wave. It was not just one note, but a chord designed to shatter specific bonds in the planet's crust. She realized that to cancel it out, you would need to broadcast its exact opposite, a mirror frequency. She also realized something else. The lander was sensitive. When a large piece of ice calved from a glacier a few kilometers away, the lander's beam had flickered for a second, adjusting to the new seismic noise. It was listening to the Earth, constantly tuning its destructive song. Her satellite phone, which had been dead, suddenly chimed. It was a weak, broken signal, but a data packet came through. It was from Jinwoo. She saw the coordinates in Korea, the strange geological scans, and the old notes about a resonance dampener. And she saw his message. The system is there. It's listening. It needs the right song to broadcast. Your data is the key. Can you get out? Mira looked at the lander, then at her terrified team, then at the vast, empty ice. Getting out was impossible, but sending a message was not. She typed a reply, her fingers stiff with cold. Frequency data is complete. Landers tuned to local geology. Their beam is the trigger. To activate your system, you must input this frequency, inverted at the source. It will reflect their own attack back. I am trapped. Good luck. She attached her full analysis and sent it, watching the signal bar fade to nothing. Jinwoo received the message in Taejun. The final piece. He knew he had to go. He told manager Kwon, I have to leave. There is a chance. A small one. Kwon looked at the screens showing the dying world. He nodded, too tired to argue. Go. What is left for you here? Maybe the mountains are safer. Jinwoo took a simple backpack. He put in a rugged laptop, cables, and a portable power source. He did not look back. The journey east was a nightmare. Roads were jammed. He abandoned his car and walked, then found a bicycle. He moved like a ghost through the panic. It took him a full day to reach the foothills where General Park had agreed to meet. The old soldier was there, by an old forestry shed. He looked out of place in civilian clothes, but his posture was straight. He had supplies, water, food, ropes, and climbing gear. He also had a heavy, old pistol in a holster. For animals, he said, though they both knew no normal animals would be a threat now. You have the data? General Park asked. Jinwoo tapped his backpack. And Myra's analysis. She says we need to input the inverted frequency. The system will do the rest. Park nodded. He looked up at the dense, dark green slopes of the mountain. The entrance will not be marked. It will be hidden. My grandfather's notes mentioned a door in the rock, near a stream with 3 waterfalls. He pointed. I know that stream. They began to climb. The forest was eerily quiet. No Vertsang. The only sound was the distant, ever-present hum that now vibrated through the air itself, the combined noise of a world being consumed. After hours of hiking, they found the stream. They followed it up past 2 cascades of white water. As they approached the 3rd waterfall, General Park stopped. He moved away from the water, toward a sheer rock face covered in thick moss and ferns that he began to brush away the vegetation with his hands. Jinwoo helped. Underneath, they found not natural stone, but smooth, gray concrete. And in the center, a metal door, rusted shut. There was no handle, no keyhole, just a flat, seamless surface. Jinwoo's heart sank. How do we open it? General Park ran his fingers along the edge of the door. It was made in a time of paranoia. It would not open with a key. He stepped back. It would open with a sound. He walked to the stream, filled his canteen, and poured water over a specific, flat stone near the door. The stone looked ordinary, but as the water hit it, it let out a clear, ringing tone. Like a bell, the metal door shuddered. With a deep, grinding shriek of metal on stone that had not moved in half a century, it slid sideways into the mountain. Darkness, and a smell of stale, cold air, greeted them from the darkness. A faint, deep, rhythmic thump echoed out. The same pulse Jinwoo had heard on his machines. The heartbeat of the forgotten shield.it was waiting. The cold from inside the mountain washed over them, carrying the smell of old rock and machine oil. The rhythmic thump was louder here, felt in the chest more than heard. General Park took a flashlight from his pack and clicked it on. The beam cut through the dust-filled dark, revealing a tunnel carved from living rock. It sloped down, deep into the heart of the mountain. They walked in silence. The air grew colder. The walls changed from rough stone to smooth concrete, then to a strange, glossy material that reflected the flashlight beam in soft patterns. Crystals, Jinwoo realized. They were embedded in the walls, glowing with a faint, internal blue light. The thumping grew stronger. The very ground seemed to pulse gently. The tunnel ended in a vast cavern. It was not a natural cave. The walls, floor, and ceiling were a single, continuous surface of the same crystalline material, humming with energy. In the center of the cavern stood a machine. It was not like anything Jinwoo had ever seen. It was both elegant and ancient. A central column of clear crystal, twice as tall as a man, rose from the floor. Inside it, intricate patterns of gold and silver wire floated, suspended in the clear material like frozen lightning. Around the base were panels filled with manual switches, dials, and old-fashioned vacuum tubes that glowed a soft orange. It was a machine from a different era, a time when technology was big and solid. And it was alive. The thump came from here. With each pulse, the wires inside the central crystal shimmered. "My grandfather's generation built this," General Park whispered, awe in his voice. He walked to the main panel, brushing dust from a faded, handwritten label. It read, "Primary Harmonic Dampener, Nexus Alpha." Jinwoo dropped his backpack, his hands shaking. This was it, the forgotten defense. He pulled out his laptop and connected it to a data port he found on the panel. It was a standard military-issue port from the 1970s. It still fit. The screen flickered, and lines of archaic code scrolled by. He accessed the main menu. The interface was simple, text-based. It showed a global map, outdated by 50 years, but on it, dozens of red dots pulsed. Each one was a Krell lander, their destructive frequencies displayed as jagged, angry waves. Overlaying it was a soft, green network, the Earth's own dampening system. It was a gentle, smoothing wave, trying to calm each red, but it was too weak, too local. The status read, Operational mode, passive dampening, global broadcast, offline. "We need to switch it to active," Jinwoo said. "We need to feed it Myra's inverted frequency and tell it to broadcast globally." General Park studied the physical controls. There is a master sequence, a safety. It was never meant to be turned on by one person. He pointed to 3 large, red levers on the far wall, each spaced meters apart. All 3 must be thrown simultaneously to initiate the broadcast sequence. Then, your frequency must be input. They heard a sound then, not the hum of the machine, a different, higher-pitched whine from the tunnel behind them, a sound of something moving fast. Before they could react, a shape appeared at the tunnel entrance. It was a Krell drone, small and sleek, about the size of a dog. It had no eyes, just a smooth, black surface and a single, glowing violet sensor. It must have followed their energy signature or the opening of the door.it hovered for a second, scanning. Then, a thin, precise beam of violet light shot from its front, slicing across the control panel. Sparks flew. Jinwoo yanked his laptop cable back as the port melted. The drone fired again, this time at the central crystal column. The beam hit the crystal and scattered, but a tiny crack appeared on the surface. The deep thump of the machine stuttered. General Park did not hesitate. He raised his old pistol and fired. The sound was enormous in the cavern. The bullet sparked off the drone's shell, doing no damage. It turned its sensor toward him. "The levers!" Park shouted to Jinwoo, moving to draw the drone's fire. "Get ready!" Jinwoo ran to the first lever. He put his hands on it. It was frozen with age. He looked across the cavern. The other 2 levers were too far apart. One person could not throw them all. General Park fired again, keeping the drone's attention. He sprinted not for cover, but for the second lever. "On my count!" he yelled, his voice echoing. "We have one chance. 3-2. The drone, ignoring the bullets, fired at the base of the central crystal again. More cracks spread. A deep groan came from the machine. 1. Jinwoo threw all his weight against the lever. It gave with a metallic shriek, slamming upward. At the same moment, General Park threw the second lever. He turned, aiming for the third, but the drone was between him and it. Jinwoo understood. He left his station and ran, sliding across the smooth crystal floor toward the final lever. The drone pivoted, targeting him. General Park did the only thing he could. He stopped shooting and ran straight at the drone, shouting. The drone fired. The violet beam caught General Park in the shoulder. He cried out, falling, but his charge had distracted it for a crucial second. Jinwoo reached the third lever. He grabbed it, tears of terror and effort in his eyes, and threw it. A deep, resonant clang echoed through the cavern. All the orange tubes on the console blazed bright white. The central crystal column glowed from within. The words on Jinwoo's laptop, now connected to a secondary port, flashed. Global broadcast sequence initiated. Awaiting harmonic input. The Krell drone, sensing the massive power surge, turned back to the crystal, charging its beam for a final, destructive shot. Jinwoo fumbled with his laptop. He pulled up Myra's file. He selected the Krell frequency and hit the command she had specified. Invert and broadcast. He looked up. The drone fired. General Park, lying on the ground, saw it. With a final, painful effort, he rolled directly into the path of the violet beam. "No!" Jinwoo screamed. The beam struck General Park, shielding the base of the console. At the same moment, Jinwoo slammed his hand on the enter key. The machine took the inverted mirror frequency of the Krell beam. It fed it into the massive crystalline lattice of the Earth itself. For a moment, there was only the dying echo of Jinwoo's cry. Then, a new sound began. It started as a low note, deeper than anything imaginable, coming from the crystal, from the walls, from the ground beneath their feet. It was the Earth song, and it was no longer a whisper. It was a command. The sound was not loud. It was too deep for that. It was a vibration that began in the bones and shook outwards. The central crystal in the cavern blazed with a light that was not violet, but a clear, brilliant gold. The light pulsed through the crystalline veins in the walls, racing away from the mountain, through the hidden networks in the Earth's crust and the cavern. The Krell drone shattered. It did not explode. It simply came apart, its pieces falling to the floor like black glass. The hum that had filled the world for days was gone, replaced by this new, profound note. Jinwoo crawled to General Park's side. The old soldier was breathing, but his eyes were dim. The violet beam had done its work. Did it work? Park whispered, each word a struggle. "I think so," Jinwoo said, his voice choked. "I think we sang the song." General Park gave the smallest nod. A faint smile touched his lips. "Good." His eyes closed. The steady rise and fall of his chest slowed, and then stopped. He had held the line one last time. Jinwoo sat there for a moment, the deep hum vibrating through him. Then he remembered his laptop. He stumbled back to the console. The screen was alive. The global map showed the red dots of the Krell landers. But now, from Nexus Alpha and from other points all across the outdated map, golden waves expanded. They moved like ripples on a pond. He watched as the first golden wave reached a red dot in Siberia. On the screen, the jagged, violent frequency of the Krell beam met the smooth, inverted golden wave. The two lines touched and canceled. The red dot did not just vanish. The data feed showed the Krell frequency spiking wildly, then turning in on itself. The lander's own destructive resonance, reflected and amplified by the planet's shield, became a feedback loop. On the screen, the red dot flared bright white and disappeared. It was happening everywhere. Across Asia, Africa, the Americas. One by one, the red dots flared and vanished from the map. The golden song of Earth flowed out, a precise, neutralizing echo. It did not attack the ships in orbit directly. It attacked the foundation of their work. It silenced their drills. And without the beam to feed on, the landers were just inert metal. The feedback surge raced up their beams and into their motherships. High above Earth, the silent black fleet received the returning signal. It was their own frequency, but perfected, mirrored, and pumped back with the amplified power of a planet's latent energy. Their shields, designed to deflect attacks, could not deflect this. It was the same key that unlocked their mining beams, now turned into a destructive scream. The ships did not explode in fire. They resonated. Their hulls, tuned to specific harmonics, vibrated at a frequency they could not withstand. From the ground, people saw the dark shapes in the sky shimmer like heat haze. Then they silently came apart, fracturing into billions of harmless, crystalline fragments that caught the sunlight, scattering it like a brief, beautiful rain of stars before drifting harmlessly into the void. The deep hum from the mountain began to soften. The broadcast was complete. The system, its job done, was returning to its watchful, passive state. The gold light in the crystal faded to a gentle blue pulse once more. Jinwoo walked out of the mountain tunnel into the quiet forest. The air was still. The ever-present vibration was gone. He could hear a bird tentatively sing. He looked up at the sky. It was clear, blue, empty. Weeks later, the world was different. It was wounded but alive. The sites of the landers were now just quiet, glassy craters. Jinwoo stood on a ridge in Gangwon-do, looking at the mountain that held Nexus Alpha. It was now the most guarded secret on Earth. Mira stood beside him. She had been evacuated from Greenland by a recovery team that finally had the courage to fly. She had asked to come here to see the source of the song that saved her. They did not speak for a long time. There were no grand celebrations. The victory felt too strange, too deep. It was not a victory of guns, but of forgotten memory and the patient strength of the world itself. "I keep thinking," Mira said finally, her voice quiet, "we didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we had already been afraid long ago. Someone prepared for a nightmare they never saw." Jinwoo nodded. He thought of General Park. He thought of the old engineer's notes. "We remembered," he said simply. Just in time. Below them, in the village, life was slowly returning. People were repairing, planting, talking. They looked at the sky with new eyes, not with fear of what might come, but with a sober understanding of what they had, and what they had almost lost. Humanity had not hurled a mighty fist. It had sung a forgotten song, a lullaby for the earth, that turned into a requiem for the consumers of worlds. The story would be told, Jinwoo knew, but the real lesson was not about weapons. It was about listening. Listening to the old stories. Listening to the quiet people. Listening to the deep, steady heartbeat of the planet they called home. Above them, the sky was clear. The shield was sleeping again, but it was there. And for the first time in a long time, the silence felt like peace.